Hello and welcome to another video, another week. And as you can see, this is probably part 2 to the last video we did last week. This video, as we've got our cycling helmets on, we're still out on our bike. And look, she's out with me as well. Safety first. Right, yeah, because of the lockdown, because of the coronavirus, we're just socially distancing ourselves a little bit from other people. So we're just local, we're in our town and we're just cycling around and getting a bit of fresh air and stuff like that. But I wanted to do a couple of videos that might be a bit more educational for you. So this video is going to tag on from last week's video, and I've just discovered that I've got both my fingers in the same glove hole, which was really stupid. We've got a car coming past. So yeah, that's it, sorting my gloves out. Right, last week's video was about focus stacking, and I hope you enjoyed that. It was a little bit different, it's a bit Compton style. And I'm going to do the same sort of thing again. I'm going to do exposure bracketing, because I talk about exposure bracketing and bracketing all the time in my videos. So we're going to take you for another little quick ride. We're going to go down to the canal, and we're going to get underneath the canal bridge, because the canal bridge is going to be obviously really shady underneath, and then above it's going to be really bright with a high bright light sky. So it's a good way of explaining how to do exposure blending and exposure bracketing and how to balance the images in Photoshop and Lightroom. So yeah, come and join us, let's get this one done. So we are now up on top of the canal bridge. It's a gorgeous day, and we've got a narrow boat coming down the canal at the moment. So I'm just going to sit here, watch the boat come down, and then I'm going to head down underneath, where it's going to be a bit darker and a bit shadier, and try and set up the camera and get a bit of video and a bit of B-roll of that down there. But yeah, it should work quite well. Good morning. Just here it do. Just here. Right, we're here. This is the bridge I wanted to use for obvious reasons. You can see underneath the bridge it's really quite dark and in shadow, and up on the top of the bridge it's quite bright. And if I just spin you around slightly, that's a bit better. We can see that in this bottom corner down there somewhere, that's where I'm going to get Denise to stand. She's going to be stood in the shadow area, so it's going to be nice and dark in there and then really bright where those people are at the top there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a photograph exposing for the shadow areas, so we get all the shadow detail, and then I'll take a photograph to exposure for the highlights. Between the two photographs, I'll then take them back to the Photoshop and Lightroom, blend them together, and you'll get an even exposure between the two. So in all true Compton style, we need the wife to join in, don't we? So we're going to send her down and get her to stand in the shadows, and I'll show you on the back of the camera what it is we're doing. Right, so as you can see in front of us now, we've got the camera set up. We've got the bridge, lovely arch of the bridge, you've got a nice sky up in the top there, and Denise is down here in the bottom corner. What we're going to try and do now, we are going to look at our histogram, and our histogram's there at the moment. If I swipe up, let's have a quick look. Yeah, if I swipe up, we get our histogram on. And what I'm going to try and do is I want to try and keep the shadow area from clipping, which is going to be this side of the image. And every time I put my finger in front of the camera, I'm sorry, it goes a bit darker. But yeah, we're going to lift the highlights very simply. I'm just going to zoom out to show you what it is I'm doing. On the top of the Fuji, let's just have a look here, let's get you a bit more composed. Right, on the top of the Fuji I've got an exposure compensation dial, and what I can do then is I can wind it up and overexpose it, and you can see it clipping on the whites, and then I can underexpose it literally by flicking the exposure dial around, which is why I quite like using aperture priority and the exposure dial. So let's zoom back in so you can see what I'm doing. Let's get back in there. Right, recompose you, let's get you back there. So first of all, we're going to take a picture of Denise underneath the bridge, and we are going to clip the highlights. We're going to lift our shadow area up so that the picture's actually coming up quite bright on the back of the screen. So we're nearly 3 overexposed at the moment. I'm just going to take some random images. F11, I'm going to focus on Denise, wherever Denise is. She's there. I'm going to focus on the edge of the bridge, so that's nice and focused. I'm going to take the shot, one shot like that, and as you can see, Denise is quite bright and quite interesting, and you can see her quite nicely. I'm also going to take another image slightly underexposed so it's a bit more even. Right, we're now going to get the histogram back on, and we're going to now underexpose it so that if you look on the histogram on here on this side of the camera, it's not clipping the highlights anymore. This is going to give you more of an even base exposure between the two. So again, I'm going to take another shot like that with Denise underneath, and then I'm going to take another one with just the sky. Now we've pulled the histogram away from this side of the image, and it's now clipping in the darker area, which is basically making your image too dark in the shadow areas. And I know this sounds really quite simple, and I'm going to take another one because you can see at the top of the image there the sky is really nice and blue. So we'll take another one of that. So I've taken 4 images, and I'm going to cheat. I'm going to get Denise now to run up to the top. So she's going to run to the top of the bridge, and I'm going to get a picture of her up on the top of the bridge. She obviously picked the long way to go. It would have been easy to come this direction. So quick run, and you can see it's quite dark up in the top, so you probably wouldn't use an exposure quite so dramatic, but this is just to show you the difference. Alright, and you can see good lady wife's at the top of the bridge now, so we can do a bit of a focus stacking. Right, we're going to take another one at this exposure, and you can see the exposure changes down on the bottom of the screen. Down there, it's changing there. That's the bit you're looking at. That's the bit that's changing, because I'm at F11, as you can see. I'm at F11 there, and that's staying. So again, we take another picture with Denise at the top. If you watch our exposure down on this point there, you see the way the exposure is getting slower and slower, and that's letting more light in, and at the same time the histogram's moving across. If we bring the histogram back up so you can see it, so we're now at 1/25 a second. I'll take another one at that. We're going to go up a bit further. Where are we going to now? We're going to start clipping the highlights, but we're going to be bringing the shadows in. We're now at 60th of a second, and then we're going to lift it right up, blow the highlights out all together, so you can see Denise is disappearing up in the top there, but you're bringing all the shadow detail back down in this area and down here, and we're now at 30th of a second. We'll even lift it up 20th of a second, and we'll take another one of that. So that's pretty much focus stacking. But while we're there, we'll get another shot, and we'll get Denise to run back down. Run down this way, it's quicker. And we're going to recompose the shot slightly. We're going to open it up, that's as wide as it will go. And this is just to give you, for instance, what we do. So we'd set the camera up like so. We get our level, make sure our level and our green line is everything's looking pretty good. Then we bring up our histogram, like so. Once our histogram's brought up, we will then balance the exposure the best we can. That's balancing it roughly between the two, so now the histogram's sort of in between the two. And on the top of the camera, if I zoom out for you, oh, there we go. If I'm on the top of the camera up here, just lift it up, there, I will flick my camera around to bracket exposures. This way my camera is now set up, if I can go back in again for you, my camera is set up in this side of the screen over there. You can see my exposures reading center. It's virtually on 0 now, but 0 is actually clipping the highlight. So I'm just going to underexpose that slightly, and that's just giving me a slightly more even histogram between the two. And then what I would do is put my camera on a 2-second timer, and I'd actually hit the button. It will take an exposure. If you look on this reading, it's going to take 5 exposures for me. It's going to take one stop above and 1 stop under. It's set up, I think, let me just line it up to tell you what it's doing. It's set up to do about 1.5 stops. So we'll hit the button, 2-second timer, and then that will do a bracketed shot. So that's your in-camera bracketed shot, which I'll also show you that when we get back to Lightroom. So it's as simple as setting up that, taking your different exposures, and yeah. So yeah, it really is as simple as setting up your camera, balancing your exposures between the two. So obviously with this scene, it's really quite dark in there and really quite bright at the top, and you can see the same if I do the same with you on the camera here now. What I do now is if I underexpose, you'll see the way the sky is, or overexposed, the sky is blowing right out. But you can see all the detail under the bridge. If I now wind that back the other direction, you'll see that the bridge becomes darker and darker underneath, but you get all the nice colour in the sky. So that's what you're doing, you're balancing the exposure between the two. But you can't do that in camera, you actually have to do that in Lightroom. So let's head back to the computer and I'll show you what I mean. So here we are back at the computer. It's not the same day, it is a couple of days later on. We are now in full lockdown. We're not supposed to be going out at all at the moment, so yeah, things are going to get a little bit more difficult, I think, in the UK before they get better. But right, anyway, let's hit record and let's get over to the screen and I'll show you what it is I'm doing. Right, so as you can see, we are in Lightroom. We've got these images, these bracketed images you can see up in front of us. You can see there I've got like a normal exposure. The one next to me, I've got a very bright exposure, I've got a medium exposure, another sort of medium, and then a darker exposure. These are all the same setting. They're all f11. These are the ones I was talking about before. This one should also be green as well as the others. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take these 5 images, I'm going to highlight them all, I'm then going to right click, I'm going to come down to Photo Merge, and I'm going to hit HDR. What this is going to do, this is going to take those 5 bracketed images and it's going to find the blend it decides it's going to work with and blend them together to get a balanced histogram and a balanced exposure between all the images. It does take quite a long time on my computer, so let's just jump to it. I've got auto align ticked. This is basically like Photoshop does. In my last video I explained exposure bracket. No, I didn't. I explained focus stacking. This is what it automatically aligns the images so that all your images are lined up and they all marry against each other perfectly rather than being offset. Just in case you get any tripod movement. You've also got auto settings clicked. Also we've got ghosting. What this does is if you've got any movement like trees that are moving, what the auto ghosting does, I've got mine set to medium. What it tends to do is it tries to set the image so that everything seems there's no ghost, so you don't get to see the tree sort of overlapping at all. They tend to it blends in really well. I can't explain it very good. You can actually show the overlapping, but I click medium, it works really well. You can see the image has just popped up as well. And then I've got create stack ticked. What that does is once I click OK and it merges, it'll take the 5 images and it'll blend them all down into one. And so I've only got one image on the display. You'll see it happen anyway when I click back. So anyway, you can see here the exposure is really nicely blended. Lightroom does a fantastic job of this. It never used to, but the last year or so it's been really good, and I use this all the time now because it's dead easy, dead quick. There are other ways of doing it. I will quickly show you in Photoshop. There is another way you can do this, but it's a bit more time consuming. This is just nice and simple. So as you can see underneath the bridge, it's nice and light. The sky's still held in, and even the whites are all held back as well. And you can see Denise is exposed quite nicely. And all we've got to do then is tick merge, and away we go. This will take a little bit of time for it to merge. You'll see up here in the top of the screen, it's starting to create the HDR. And I don't think they look overly HDR. HDR is a high dynamic range, but I think, like I say, Lightroom does a fantastic job of this now, and I don't believe that they look overly false. HDR used to look really false, but now it's got pretty good. It's pretty clever technology. You'll see when it's finished that these 5 images will jump into one, and it will have a stack 1 of 5, or 1 of 6 it should have, because it have the edited version and the other 5. So it'll just stack them up, basically just to shrink down my screen a little bit so we don't get loads and loads of images up on the screen. There we go. You can see now it's jumped down into one. All the green ones have disappeared, and we've got there stack of 6, and it says photos as part of a stack. So if we click on that one, click E, and that'll bring up the picture for you. There we go. It comes up here in the top corner. It's got my file name, HDR as a DNG. There's your exposure. The base exposure is that 1/200th of a second, which you saw on the camera anyway. F11, ISO 160, which is my native lowest ISO, and then it even gives you 16mm on the 1655 f2.8 IR lens, or WR lens. Anyway, back to the image. You can see the sky's held in nicely. It's not overly blue. The whites are sort of held back. There's nothing clipping over here up in the top of the histogram. Nothing's clipping at all, and the shadows are just touching the darks. But I think that's a pretty good exposure. But for me, it doesn't quite look right. It doesn't quite look true to the way it should be. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to click develop, which is up there. It's going to bring me in as a develop module, and what I can do then is I can play with the settings it decided. So it decided the highlights should be down, the contrast should be down a little bit, -30, the shadows should be up, the whites are balanced at 0.9, and the blacks are just down a little. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to lower the shadows just to bring the shadows down so they look like shadows. I don't think they need to be overly bright. Where they were before was somewhere up there, and it just doesn't look right. So So I'm just going to bring the shadows down. I know all the details there, but I'm just going to bring the shadows back a little bit. That's my image done, and all I wanted to do is just show you how that works in post-processing. Really, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this side of the slider. I don't want to show too much because I will come back and show you that afterwards, but that's how HDR works in camera. So let's go back to the library by pressing G. We'll do the same again on the purple ones, because now you know Denise is at the top of these ones. We've got 4 images this time exposed. We're going to go down, right click, we're going to go down to Photo Merge HDR, hit that, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. As you can see, the greens are just starting to fill up now. It's getting to the top of its process, and when it's done, it will come up down there and highlight the merge. And again, all the settings are exactly the same. Auto aligns ticked, auto settings ticked. I don't know what happens if I untick that. No, I'm going to leave it ticked. It always has been. And I'm going to keep the medium ghosting and create stack. Image has popped up. As you can see, the image has popped up, and now Denise is at the top there. A nice balanced exposure. I'm going to press merge, and it's going to start to merge the image, and you'll see these will collapse into one stack, and the graph is at the top there, just showing you how far it is on the process. There we go, the image is now dropping down, and it's now come down to a stack of 5, and the one on the top is my HDR, which you can see there. We'll do the same again. We'll click E, which brings us into the editing, which brings the image up a bit bigger, and you can see there the file name again, HDR, DNG, and all the camera settings for the basic image. And again, it's looking quite bright underneath this image, and Denise is looking lovely at the top there. So we're going to develop, click D for develop, and once again it just doesn't look quite natural, so we're just going to bring the shadows back down, and that's it, job done. Again, you can see Denise at the top there, and it's looking quite nice. So you can see that we've got another 5 images, the yellow set. These are the ones that were taken automatically in camera. The camera done a really good job, and always does a really good job of doing this. Like I said, I've got it set up at 2/3 stops, so it's taking a base exposure, which is this one. It's also taking one that's a 2/3 overexposed, which is this one. One that 1 1/3, which is 2/3 exposure overexposures is this one, and then we've got this 2/3 underexposed, and then 1 1/3, which is the 2/3 underexposed. Does that make sense to you? It does to me. So there's your 5 images, and again, all we're going to do is we'll click on the first one, highlight all 5, right click, go down to Photo Merge, HDR, and click HDR. Show you this one so it shows the difference between doing it automatically, where you've got all 5 images in camera, and the difference between that and the one we did manually, where we manually exposed it. Manual exposure works quite well if you need to override the basic settings. I've got my camera set so that between 1 and a bit over and 1 and a bit under is not bad at all. If I find, you tend to find you need a little bit more shadows or a little bit less highlights, that's the difference. So I can wind my base exposure below, so we go say 2/3 at a starter, and then it'll go 1 1/3 below the 2/3. So you're going down 1 to 2, you're going down to 2 underexposed. At 2 stops is quite a lot. Or you can wind it over slightly if you've got a really dark image and you want to bring up all the shadows and it's really not working quite well. You can actually start your first image 1 stop over, and then you can get going up to 2 1/4 stops, 2 1/3 stops. You can set the camera up how you want. In the food you can set 7 stops, 10 stops, 3 stops of exposure bracket in either side, up to I think 3 stops maximum each way. So yeah, there's a lot of scope and a lot of variation you can do in camera, and that's just speed really more than anything. You can do it manually, but it's a lot quicker. Just get the camera set up, leave it on bracketing, set up your exposure roughly where you want it, bang, 5 images done, or 7 images if you want. Now I know we're stuck indoors, and we're doing, I'm trying to sort of fill time and trying to give you something to watch more than anything. I've got lots of videos already lined up, already in the pipeline, that are already on. Been up to Scotland and stuff like that, so they will be coming out. But I thought I'd just do some of this processing stuff because we are stuck indoors. They're a bit more longer videos, give you something to watch, keep you entertained. If you want to see more, let me know in the comments. Let me know what it is you'd like to see. I will do a basic editing. If you can pick your favourite image, say out on my calendar, or that I've showed on YouTube over the last whatever, 6 months or a year. Pick your favorite image, let me know in the comments, and I'll put it up on the screen. I'll pick two of the two top images that I voted for, and I'll put them up on screen, and I'll try and show you how I processed them, if I can remember, that is. So yeah, there's a little project for you. Have a look through some of my videos, pick an image, and you know, I'll try and show you how I processed it. Right, here's the image then. It's done. We're going to drop it straight down into Photo Merge. We're going to get that up on the screen, and I'll come back and talk to you. Okay, there we go. Process is nearly done, and there we go. Stack of 6. That's one HDR image, and the other 5 underneath it. What we can actually do, we can actually open these up. So if we click on the little box there, it opens up the images that we've got. So we've got these 5 images that were taken in camera, and then this 5th one. So what I'm going to do is click E, and I'm just going to show you the difference between them. This is your HDR. This is the in-camera 5 bracketed exposures that Lightroom's decided looks correct. To me, I think it just needs the exposure dropping down slightly under the bridge. Like I say, the shadows are just too bright. It's a little bit false. So we'll quickly go into develop, and then I'll show you the other images. So we're just going to sort this one out. As soon as it pops back up, we're just going to bring the shadows down just to make it look a little bit more natural. I think that looks just fine as it is. Right, click E, go back into the image. So this is our HDR image. You can see it at the top there, HDR. I'm now just going to flick across to the other images. So we've got, this one is our base image. Now I know in my camera that the Fuji sensor is really quite good, and I can take this base image and I can actually process that one to get it look very similar to the HDR, because it's got a good dynamic range. You can see from the shadow detail and the highlights, and everything's in there, and it's not actually clipping really. It's a little bit clipping on the darks, but it's not actually clipping either side, to be honest. Next image is the one that's 2 exposures overexposed, and then the one that's 1 which is 2/3, 1 overexposed, and you've got the 2/3 under, and then you got the 1 1/3 under. So there your 4 bracketed shots, your 5th base image, and then your HDR, which is your finished project. And you can see in the HDR that you've got this lovely bit of detail underneath the bridge, a nice bit of reflected light coming down here in this corner where the sun's bouncing off down here, and the sky's all kept in quite nicely. So that's your images, that's them done. I'm going to now go and get myself a cup of coffee and wait for Denise to come home. She's just taking her daughter home, and yeah, that's about it really. I'm going to stop record while that just keeps running on its own. Yeah, I'm going to go get myself another coffee, get myself a refill because this one's empty, and I'll see you on the next video. So till next time, hope you've enjoyed this. Hope it's explained something about exposures and bracketing. What can I say? Ciao for now. Don't forget, please like and subscribe. Hit the bell down in that bottom corner to get notifications to when I do other videos. They're not always going to be sat in front of this array of screens I've got. I do like to get out, and I do like to be outside rather than inside. So yeah, please hit the notification bell. It makes a lot of difference to my channel. It really does help it grow. And if you're not a subscriber, please do subscribe. It is great. I love it. I absolutely love having people like yourselves watching and commenting and being part of the channel. Without you guys, it just seems pointless doing it, especially this sort of stuff anyway. But I'm always going to get out and play with the camera. So yeah, just thought I'd add that on. Please like, please subscribe, please share this video, and hit that notification bell. Right, I'm going. Ciao.